Hi everyone, this is Hana, and welcome back to my island. Oh, at this year's World Cup, the 2026 tournament in Mexico, something happened that people all over the world could not understand. It was Korea's third group match against South Africa. And foreign reporters and football fans everywhere kept asking the same question. Why was Son Heung-min starting on the bench? For anyone who does not follow football closely, Sonny is Korea's captain and biggest star. He's one of the best forwards in the world. So benching him made no sense to people watching from outside. And honestly, Koreans did not understand it either. When the players came out to warm up, his face appeared on the big screen in the stadium. And the crowd roared. But that roar was not a cheer. It was a cry that he should be out there. And at the same time, it was the protest against the fact that he was not. It was a moment that shamed both the player and the people watching. Sonny has started every World Cup since Brazil in 2014, 12 straight matches as a starter. And now, on what might be the last stage of his career, in a game where even a draw would send Korea through, he sat on the bench for the first time. And Korea lost. He came on in the second half, but it was already too late. After the match, he bowed his head. He said he was sorry he could not do more on the pitch to keep the team from losing. It was not the weather, he made clear. It was not the mood in the camp. So here is what we are left with. An incompetent head coach created this situation. And when the result came, it was Captain Sonny, a Premier League Golden Boot winner, who bowed his head instead. I sat with this image for a long time, and here's what I came to. This is not the story of one lost match. This is a small picture of how a whole country treats its own people. No, of how it treats its own children. And when you think back over everything Sonny went through during this tournament, it lands even harder. Before the team had even played in the first match, the Korean reporters assigned to cover him were caught on an open mic, talking behind his back. They said things like he runs around bossing people like a platoon leader just because he's a captain, and they called him a guy who never even served in the military. I need to stop and explain this one. In Korea, military service is one of the most sensitive subjects there is. Every Korean man has to serve. There are only a few ways to be exempted. One is for athletes who win gold at the Asian Games or who medal at the Olympics. Sonny earned his exemption fairly by winning gold at the 2018 Asian Games. And yet, that exemption became something they mocked him for. The more I think about it, the more bitter it feels. These reporters had flown out especially to cover Sonny and the Korean national team. Their whole job was to carry his matches, his contributions back home to Korea. And behind his back, they mocked the very exemption he had earned through those contributions. What those reporters did was not a slip of the tongue. It was something deeper. It is the discomfort that people who survived inside Korea's old system feel when they meet someone who built a much bigger world outside of it. Sonny didn't get ahead by acing the National College entrance exam. He did not climb by pleasing his seniors. He went out into the world on his own and became world class. And his very existence breaks the grammar of rank that Korea runs on. The players were angry enough to boycott their own country's press, and the audio spread overseas in no time. People started mocking Koreans as a strange people, always desperate to tear down their own. Korea's national football team is a small picture of Korean society itself. On the world stage, with people everywhere watching, Son Heung-min, a superstar who rose on his own, was cut twice by the very people who should have been on his side. once by a microphone held by reporters from home, and once by his head coaches, a lineup. The grown-ups pass the blame to each other, and the young man keeps his mouth shut. The ones carrying the most are the ones who say the least. The national team head coach Myung-bo officially called it managing Sonny's stamina. He said putting Sonny in during the second half, once the other team was tired, would be better for the team and for Sonny himself. It sounds like a tactics. But look at the fuller picture. Here is a player who proved his worth on the world stage. Throughout the tournament, he was played out of his natural position where he could not what he does best. Then his quiet form there was used as the reason to send him to the bench. Once you see that sequence, a different picture appears. And here we have to remember how Sonny was made into the player he is. His father, Son Woong-jung, raised him outside Korea's youth football system. He rejected the school pipeline that cares only about winning titles, and he taught his son himself. And that father has spent years speaking hard truth to the Korean Football Association, KFA. Sonny is almost the only superstar the Korean football cartel cannot claim it raised. But I don't want to paint Sonny's father as a clean hero. In 2024, he was reported for physically punishing and verbally abusing youth players at his own football academy. The court ordered him and his coaching staff to pay fines and to complete a child abuse treatment program. And Sonny himself is known to have been raised through harsh methods, including physical punishment. So Sonny's father resisted Korea's sports bureaucracy and its cartel, but the violent training culture of Korean sports he reproduced with his own hands. He refused the absurdity of the system, and yet the system's way of controlling the body he carried in his own. This is the most tangled layer of Korea's cultural violence in sports. The victim and the abuser can live inside one person. Some people justify their own pain by passing the very violence they endured down to the next generation. And that is the heart of the problem. In Korea's sports bureaucracy, a player's success has to belong to the system. But with Sonny, that story does not hold. From an outside base called Tottenham, with the hard proof of a Premier League Golden Boot, he became someone bigger without the Korean Football Association's approval. So how does the Korean system handle a player it cannot control? Not with recognition, with the restraint. I cannot know whether Myung-bo, the head coach, felt some personal inferiority toward Sonny. I can only guess. But in terms of structure, the two of them were bound to clash from the start. A head coach, the cartel placed in his chair, and a player raised outside the cartel. Myung-bo is a legend inside the Korean football cartel, and he rose to the head coach's job on that authority. Even after the disaster of the 2014 World Cup, it was an old boy network inside the association that put him back in the head coach's chair in 2026 again. Let me explain that. In Korea, there's a long-standing perception that graduates of one school, Korea University, forms a tight circle that controls Korean football. Meanwhile, Sonny proved himself on the world stage with no help from the domestic system at all. The authority comes from the system, but the player's value was proven with nothing to do with that system. Maybe that is why. All through the World Cup, you could see a head coach who did not know how to handle a player who had already become bigger than him without his authority or his approval. Myung-bo's problem is not only a matter of tactical skill. It is a problem of the Korean football system. Picture someone who does not know how to use a player far better than him in every way, sitting above that player in the hierarchy. This is a pattern that repeats everywhere in Korean organizations. Someone rises to a position through years of service and connections rather than ability. Then they do not know how to handle a junior who is better than they are. And in the end, they misuse that person and ruin them. On top of this, Myung-bo used his own people no matter the results. Call it Hong's brand of connection football. Sol Young-woo, a player he knew from his Ulsan days, kept starting even while struggling. And Jens Kastrup, who gave up even the German national team to choose his mother's country, South Korea, did not play a single minute across 3 matches. He finally came on in the second half on the game they were already losing. If he was only going to warm the bench, why naturalize Jens and bring him over at all? This is not only Sonny's story. There is also An Se-young. For anyone who does not know, An Se-young is Korea's badminton star and Olympic champion. Unlike Sonny, she had no overseas base. She belonged to a domestic team fully inside the federation system, and she became world number 1. It was the perfect setup for the federations to say, "We raised her." And so the control over her was the harshest of all. Her injuries were left untreated. She raised the concerns about the bad old habits of the national team, but they were dismissed as a long-standing custom. She was not even allowed to sign her own personal sponsorship deals. Korean sports administration is built on the assumption that an athlete's career is short. The athlete is treated as a disposable part, and the federations and coaches hold the power to ration that part out. In this structure, the source of power is not skill. It is the chair you sit in. The Football Association and Myung-bo and the former leadership of the Badminton Federation too, they all earned their authority through skill as athletes. But the moment they became officials, the way they protected the authority changed from achievement to control. So the fact that An Se-young broke through all of that to reach world number 1, that is the true remarkable thing. She did not get there carried by the system's support. She got there in spite of the system's limits. And then, at the very moment she held the highest right to speak, with an Olympic gold medal from the 2024 Paris Games around her neck, she opened her mouth. It was carefully timed, but that care makes me sad. Think about what it means. A person can only earn the standing to name the wrong done to them after they reach the very top of the world. And only right at the moment the gold medal is around their neck. That young athlete had already learned early that people would only listen to her if she spoke after winning gold. If An Se-young had not had that Olympic gold, her account would probably have been buried as the whining of an ungrateful athlete. Korea's sports world has a strong organizational culture with a military-style hierarchy transplanted straight into it. Someone who experienced that authoritarian structure as an athlete becomes an administrator or a head coach and reproduces the same structure without thinking. What happens is not reform, it is copying. In fact, when An Se-young exposed the federation's corruption, a senior former player named Bang Soo-hyun took the federation's side, saying, "I went through all of it too." Because the moment you admit that the pain you endured was the system's fault, it feels like your whole past is being denied. And so the victim defends the next generation's abuse. In the end, the cartel in every corner of our society does not run on ill will alone. They are also structures built by people who want to justify their own pain, and that makes them even harder to break. The figure skating queen Kim Yuna went through this too. In a country that calls itself a power on the ice, there was no infrastructure to support the best figure skater in the world. So she went to Canada to find a coach. She and her family covered the coast themselves, and she was left to climb to the World Championship alone. Right after the judging controversy at the Sochi Olympics, the Korean Sports and Olympic Committee and the Skating Union announced they would not file an appeal. That drew criticism from around the world and fierce pushback from her fans. When you place the three of them side by side, the pattern is so clear it gives you chills. Son Heung-min, An Se-young, Kim Yuna. None of the three shone because of the system. The moment a player's value proven on the international stage moved beyond what Korean sports bureaucracy could control, the system instead tried to pull the players down or to weaken them. With An Se-young, the federation seized her body and her incomes through injury management and sponsorship. With Sonny, the head coach tried to dilute the player's value through position and playing time. The system was trying to ruin the player, and the player shone anyway. But once they shine, the system takes that light and makes it its own. If there is a difference, it is this. An Se-young used the timing of an Olympic gold exactly right and changed the structure herself. Sonny, because he was the captain, could not publicly criticize the head coach to the end and had to choose to bow his head instead. One of them changed the system, the other kept their dignity inside it. And in the end, both were worn down, each in their own way. Why does this run so deep? Korean professional baseball was thrown together by the military dictatorship of Chun Doo-hwan, the new military regime that seized power through the Gwangju massacre of May 1980. They wanted to turn the public's eyes away. In 1980, soldiers killed the citizens in the city of Gwangju who were protesting for democracy. The generals who ordered that then took control of the country. And one way they distracted people was the so-called 3S policy: screen, sex, and sports. The decision was made in a meeting at the Blue House, which was the Korean president's office at the time. They gave huge tax breaks to the big conglomerates and built a league in a single year. Korean professional sports did not grow as an industry that followed the demand of fans. It started as a political tool handed down from above. Back then, people called it a hobby of conglomerates chairmen, a pet sports. This is when the way the state, the press, and the public see athletes was formed. The athlete was not an individual. The athlete was a national asset, a tool for raising the country's prestige. A culture where the federation exists not for the athlete, but for power and vested interest, got carved in like DNA. As the Chun Doo-hwan military dictatorship used the sports for politics, the story that our athletes won on the world stage fused with national identity. This became the frame the press used to report sport, and it became the emotional structure the public uses to expect things from athletes. Seeing athletes as national assets gives the federation the logic that we have the right to manage them. It gives the press a habit of putting results ahead of the athlete's private pain. And it plants in the public a feeling that when an athlete claims their own rights, they are being selfish. When an athlete wins, they belong to all the people. When they lose, they become a sinner. When they resist the federation, they become an ingrate. When An Se-young criticized the federation right after her goal, the reaction was, "After the country raised you." Sonny, as captain, could not publicly criticize the head coach to the end. Kim Yuna, in the such judging controversy, bowed her own head even though the federation did nothing. It is all the same structure. The most tragic part is that the athletes themselves often take this view inside. Sonny does not question the head coach's decision and says first, "I'm sorry," to the fans. An Se-young calculated that she would only have the right to speak once she won gold. The victim explains themselves only in the language of the system. A seed planted in the era of military dictatorship in 1982 has grown for more than 40 years. And now, in 2026, it is still at work, right there at the World Cup. Of course, Korea has places that run reasonably well too. The Archery Association. Even an Olympic gold medalist has to pass reselection. Even if you're close to the association president, if you lose in the trials, you are done. The number of evaluation arrows shot in a single year passes 4,000. Private coaching is banned. There is no gap for connections and personal ties to slip through. But we have to look honestly at why this exception was possible. Since 1985, the Hyundai Motor Group has sponsored archery for a huge sum over the long time and has held the association president's chair directly. The sponsor and the operator are the same. So corruption in the association becomes a disgrace to that family. With no money worries, there is no reason to be swayed by outside interest. A good system did not make good people. A good system made it so that bad acts could not happen. So then, could other associations now just join hands with a big company too? It's not that simple. Hyundai got into archery in 1983 when it was still a small sport. Who would step into a sport that is already large, with a tangled and complicated interest, and tear up its own structure now? And if you ask whether it is really healthy for democracy that a third generation chaebol heir inherits an association, that is another problem. A chaebol, by the way, it is a family control conglomerate that kind of dominates the Korean economy. A system that leans on one family's goodwill collapses the moment that goodwill cools. Is there even one Korean sports association run transparently with the public oversight without a conglomerate? There's not. Even after democratization, Korea's long entrenched bureaucratic culture was transplanted whole in the form of these associations. The laws exist, but where there is no will, the structure does not work. If you look at who opened their mouths after the South Africa match, you can draw a map of the Korean football cartel. Park Ji-sung, working as a commentator, spoke with a look on his face like he was about to cry. He said he could not see any will to win. And he said the players were not able to what they wanted to do. He aimed straight at the Football Association, saying the same mistake of 2014 were being repeated. For viewers who do not know, Park Ji-sung is the most famous Korean footballer of his generation, a former Manchester United player. He's one of the people who came up under Hiddink in 2002, the Dutch coach who led Korea to the World Cup semi-final that year. He's not in Myung-bo's line. Even when he went into the Football Association, he was given only the title of head of youth strategy and he left after a year. Bang Mun-sung, a commentator with 27 years of experience, finally broke into tears. He said the responsibility is lopsided. The ones who hold the most power and benefit bear the least responsibility. Shinmun-son, a former commentator, also delivered a sharp line. The World Cup, he said, is not the plaything of one head coach. What these people have in common is that they all see football from outside the cartel. They did not come from playing, or they do not belong to the Korean university football line, or they were pushed out of the association. The ones on the inside stay silent, or they cover for him saying, "Come on, Myung-bo, let's do well." Who speaks and who stays silent tells you where that person belongs. As for Myung-bo himself, right after the match, he said, "The result is my responsibility." And then he immediately added, "The players were impatient." It is a way of speaking that pretends to accept responsibility while quietly shifting the blame onto the players. What created that impatience was the absence of tactics, right? And the responsibility for the absence of tactics belongs to the head coach. The words "my responsibility" sometimes become the hardest shield of all. They read as a signal. I have admitted everything, so do not push any further. I know it is frustrating. The Football Association, the Badminton Federation, the Skating Union, the media cartel, and at the root of it all, the military dictatorship. This structure you see in sports is actually lodged in exactly the same way in every corner of Korean society. In education, in the media, in politics, in labor, the establishment seizes the system. And when a talented young person breaks through it, they intercept that person, or if the person grown too big, they hold them down. The association that exists to help athletes tries to break the wings of an athlete reaching to rise on their own and pull them back to the ground. So, how do we fix it? There's no single magic answer. If there were, it would have been fixed long ago. But there is still a path I can see. First, an outside shock. An Se-young's account drew the whole country's attention. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism stepped in. And in the end, the president of the federation was replaced. The Korean system does not fix itself from the inside. It only moves when public opinion and outside power push in. The problem is that not every athlete can have a gold medal and perfect timing the way An Se-young did. Second, and so the real solution is putting it into the rules. A system that leans on individual courage does not last. Archery runs well not because the people are kind, but because the rules block bad acts from happening. A rule that avoids a head coach's appointment if the proper process is broken. A duty to disclose the association's finances openly. An independent body where athletes can raise problems without retaliation. It has to be required by law. Third, the slowest but most fundamental thing is culture. Seeing the athlete not as a national asset, but as a human being. Not, we raised you, so obey, but your talent is yours and we are the people who help it. And here I think again Jans Kastrup. Right after he joined the national team, in an interview with the German media, he described the culture of the Korean team. The youngest players get on the elevator last. After meals, they bring fruits to their seniors. And no one stands up until everyone has finished eating. He explained that he was trying to introduce a good culture. But the moment Korean society heard it, they bristled, calling it a 꼰대 culture. 꼰대 is a Korean word for an old person who lords their seniority over everyone. The hierarchy that is ours, seen through the eyes of someone from outside, we were instantly ashamed of. And that shame is itself a signal. We already know it is a problem. We just will not admit it out loud. But there's one thing I want to make clear. If all of this drifts into the cynicism of Korea's hopeless, that too is losing to the system in the end. An Se-young changed things. The new president allowed personal sponsorship deals. Influential figures like Park Ji-sung, Park Mun-sung, and Shin Mun-sun began to speak openly. It is slow, but the cracks are clearly forming. And change always begins in those cracks. I lived 10 years outside Korea as a diver. In the days when I dove into the sea every day on a small island, I was always an invited guest. The sea never raised me. It only stayed quietly in its place while I learned on my own how to go down and how to rise back up. That is what good water is. It does not try to own the diver. The associations should be like that. The grown-ups who hold the power should be like that too. They should not try to own the athlete, the young person. They should just become good water. Welcome the talent that comes in. Send off the athlete who leaves with grace. When an athlete is struggling, stay beside them quietly and be a source of strength. But our water cages the one who enters and grabs the ankle of the one trying to rise. Sonny will be 38 in 4 years. There probably will not be a next time. Maybe, maybe not. His last World Cup stage was wrecked by a system that felt uncomfortable because it could not control him. Jens gave up the German national team and chose his mother's country. It was a choice that closed his own way back. And a player like that spent the whole tournament guarding the bench, came on in the second half of a losing game, and bowed his head, saying his own mistake. The calm that a 22-year-old showed hurt me even more. Somewhere along the way, he too seemed to have observed Korean group culture. And An Se-young could only speak after she won gold. How those wonderful players ever came out of a system like this, I still do not understand. Probably it is because the system did not raise them. They broke through it. And the fact is exactly the truth this country should be ashamed of. If a world-class athlete came out not thanks to the system, but by overcoming it, then the system does not exist for the athlete. It exists to reign over the athlete. Even now, the young people of this country are fighting alone, each in their own place. Inside the structure where the association, the company, the school, the stadium have become not a ladder, but a wall. The grown-ups who build the system, no, who are the system itself, once again pass off the responsibility. And they silence the young people who get ground down at that system's sacrifice. Our society has far too few good grown-ups. So what did you think? If my story resonated with you, a like and a subscribe mean the world to me. And if you'd like to help keep this channel going, please consider joining the membership. Let's meet again here next time. Until then, rest easy on the island that fits your own latitude. This has been Hana's Island. Here, you're safe.